Okay, so I'm going to continue sneaking through these little borders, which is the plumb line block. And then we're going to go into the next chapter, which is called Color My World, I believe. It's with paintbrushes. But my takeaway from that chapter is long wood grain or flowing water looking patterns, which I'm going to run through the background, and then I'm going to choose another accent stitch for the blue. Excuse me. I'm going to do this long flowing wood grain-esque shape. Never tried this before, so I'm going to come up and down, turn around, and then make like a knot hole. Almost a flame type of a shape. I'm going to come around the shape that I just did and come back down. The reverse direction. Here we go, paisleys. They're teardrop shaped, and sometimes if they're big, they will have another shape inside, and you can echo around them. This is another tool that is in most long armor and domestic machines quilters toolbox. Mine, ooh, they turned out like leaves. Must have that leaf shape stuck in my head, so we're going to go with a paisley influenced leaf shape. Because sometimes you just got to go with what you started with, even if it wasn't exactly what you planned. How funny is that? Welcome to the Machine Quilting Blog Hop. This book, The Ultimate Guide to Machine Quilting by Krista Watson and Angela Walters, is the book that we are blogging through every Monday for 10 weeks. Week 2 brings several concepts that are really, kind of tough to master when you're first starting out. There are 3 main takeaways that I have from this chapter. The first one being that you want to create contrast with color, so like a bright quilt with a light background, or you want to create contrast with stitching. So in this exercise for the free motion quilting, because that's what we're focusing on, is contrast in quilting. Overall, you want to make a texture contrast. Sometimes you want to make thread color contrast too, and Krista does a lot of thread changes in many of her quilts, and Angela does also. But in the book, it is about creating a very long area of high contrast texture. And the particular stitch that I really like that she talked about quite a bit in the book, both Angela and Krista, is a flame shape or wood grain type finish. And I'll show you a little bit more of that in a how-to video later on. And I will do a close-up on the quilt. But week 2 also was a discussion about pebbles. So this quilt is the one that we are talking about, and doing long contrast with a contrasting quilting stitch in the blue. Now also is a discussion about pebbles and how to make pebbles, and I'm going to hold this right up because in the middle of the block is my practice on pebbling. And pebbling is really hard, and It's one of those things, the more I practice, sometimes the worse I get, because you can get very tense with pebbling, and you have to be very relaxed. Don't start with pebbling too small is my tip. Start with a little bit bigger circles, the size of a pea, maybe even bigger if you have a really big space, or a practice swatch the size of a dime. And you're really going around in a circle, and then you trace over where you were, and you almost do a figure 8 underneath it or next to it, and you go around again, and you do the same shape around and trace back and around again. I will do get a pencil, and I will trace the shapes on the block to show you how I did it. But I'm telling you, the tracing over yourself is very hard to do. I find it hard on a long arm sometimes because I get going too fast, or I'm having problems seeing exactly where I want it to go because maybe I picked thread that really matches the quilt. So when you're first starting, try picking high contrast thread, like a white background with a black thread, or vice versa. That helps to see what you're doing. Doesn't always make the prettiest stitches on a quilt though, so depending on what you're wanting to accomplish. So you have to be careful of doing circular shapes with a circular shape being a contrast, like a swirl. Sometimes it works really well if that's the look you're going for. Other times it does not. So in the particular quilts that she talked about, she was looking for long wavy lines coming down with... Well, learning about this camera, sorry about the interruption. So anyway, flame shapes, that is what Angela does a lot in this chapter, and I did a couple of different spots on this quilt that I think you can see quite well. In block number 3, this is a star that Krista Watson actually designed for the Orville Designer of the Month. I will link down in the description of the video or in the blog about this star. So what I want you to see is the flame in this improv pieced center. I do have a couple strings that I haven't got buried, and my arthritis is flared up today, so I can't do it. So, hey, we're keeping it real, right? So here you can see is the beginning of where I started on the center shape. I went around, up in an S, down, and then keep curving. Come down and around, come back up and curve, and just keep this fire flame feel. Long shape up, and I'm alternating between long and short stitches. Great, the sun just came out. So you can see, here is my thread. This is where I started. And I just want to show you some of the shape of pebbles and a couple pebble variations that I did. A pebbling is more of a figure 8, so I started here, and I went around. I traced where I went. I came back around here. That one I totally backtracked, came around, and then I came down, snuck back around, did another one, came around. Some of them are backtracked, some of them are backtracked twice and around. So it's almost figure 8, round, around, 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 around. And you feel that rhythm as I'm speaking, because that is really what you have to get into, a rhythm of these. The other key is vary the sizes, vary spacing to give it more interest. Now here is one of my favorite that is actually a variation. You start around and you echo it. You go around and round, round, and then a little circle on the inside, almost like an olive. Around and around. In fact, that's what I call these, around and around. Big one and little. And so when you get the big ones against the little ones, it makes great texture. Here, I got into a little bit better rhythm of it. I'm a lot more satisfied with how these look, but every once in a while, I'm going to point this out, you're not going to hit exact when you backtrack. So this is an exercise in pebbles and contrasting with texture. You can see these are paisley teardrop shapes, rainbow shapes, and here's some really big olives. Now these are fun. These are kind of oval shaped, but I did around and then inside. No, I didn't. Try it again. I started over here and worked counterclockwise and around. Big loop and around. And you can see the shape around and around. Now here's some pebbling with a little bit of a contrast. Almost like a DNA shape. And you just find your way around. So this block is fun. Pebbling. Don't be too hard on yourself when you first start. Remember, practice makes progress, and we have to let go of perfection, as well as picking contrast. High contrast in stitches make for better interest in the block. Not so high contrast. Let's go back to week 1. You can see a lot of contrast in the borders. And then I did straight lines, swirls, tight ribbon candies, and straight lines again. It's the end of the video for week 2. Please share. You can share on Instagram. We're using the hashtag MachineQuiltingBlogHop.